They ghosted. They pulled away just when things felt close. Maybe they said they weren't ready for a relationship or they needed space to figure things out. And then, weeks or months later, they're back. A text, a like on your story, a casual "hey, how've you been?" And suddenly you're left wondering, why now? Do they miss me? Do they regret walking away? Should I respond? I'm Jim Rohn, and in this video, we're going to break down something most people don't talk about honestly: why avoidants come back and what actually sparks their return. If you've ever loved someone with an avoidant attachment style, you already know the pain of being shut out, right? When you're trying to build closeness. You didn't do anything wrong. You just got close enough to trigger their fear of intimacy, and their nervous system told them to run. But here's the part that confuses people the most. They almost always return, and not because they've had some massive transformation, but because your absence feels safer than your emotional presence ever did. In this video, I'll show you the psychology behind their withdrawal, the emotional process that quietly unfolds while they're gone, and what really motivates them to reach back out. Spoiler alert, it's not always about love. It's often about relief, nostalgia, or emotional control. I'll also share what to watch for when they return, so you don't get pulled into another round of emotional whiplash. Because real change requires more than just a text. It requires accountability, growth, and the ability to meet you emotionally, not just miss you. So if you're ready to stop second-guessing yourself, get clarity on their behavior, and show up from a place of secure self-worth, hit that subscribe button, tap the bell for more weekly insights, and leave a comment to share your story. Let's dive in. If you've ever found yourself asking, why did they come back just when I finally started to move on? You're not alone. And no, it's not a coincidence. Avoidants don't come back at random. Their return is rarely about some sudden realization that they lost the love of their life. More often, it's about emotional regulation. Their system has had enough time and space to feel safe again. And that safety is what allows them to reach out, not necessarily emotional clarity or commitment. Let's zoom out and look at what's happening on a deeper level. Avoidantly attached individuals are often shaped by childhood experiences where emotional closeness came with unpredictability, pressure, or shame. Maybe they were told to toughen up, or their needs were met inconsistently, sometimes warmly, other times with coldness or irritation. Over time, their nervous system learned a survival strategy. Don't get too close, or you'll lose your sense of safety and control. So even in adulthood, when someone starts to matter emotionally, it triggers that old fear. That's why they pull away, right when things start to feel emotionally real. It's not about you, it's not about something you did wrong. It's about the internal alarm bells going off in their nervous system. Closeness equals risk. Vulnerability equals danger. So they retreat, not to manipulate, but to protect themselves. And this is what makes avoidant attachment so confusing for their partners. You feel like things were finally going well, and then suddenly, they vanish. But here's where it gets even more complicated. They often come back. And when they do, it feels like maybe they've had some kind of epiphany. But in reality, what's happened is time and distance have calmed their nervous system. You're no longer too close. The emotional pressure is gone. That's when their mind starts idealizing the relationship, remembering the good parts, filtering out the emotional tension, and craving the comfort you once gave them. Their selective memory kicks in, the discomfort that caused them to leave fades, and suddenly they feel pulled toward the version of you that felt emotionally safe when it wasn't too close. I had a client named David who experienced this firsthand. His avoidant ex broke things off after they had a vulnerable, emotionally open conversation. He was devastated. Weeks went by, he grieved, he worked on himself, and just as he was beginning to feel like himself again, she reached out. At first, it felt like a second chance, but within days, the same patterns started to show up. She wanted connection, but only on her terms. He was warm when it was convenient, but the moment he expressed his needs again, she grew cold. That's because her return wasn't about growth, it was about relief. The distance had helped her reset, but it didn't mean she was suddenly ready for real emotional intimacy. So if you're in this situation, it's okay to feel hopeful, but it's also important to stay clear. Their return isn't necessarily about you. It's about what your presence represents after enough space. Comfort without pressure. But comfort is not the same as commitment, and recognizing that is how you protect your peace. Let's talk about why avoidants leave in the first place, because understanding this helps you stop taking it personally. For people with an avoidant attachment style, intimacy doesn't automatically register as safety. It often feels like pressure, like loss of control, like stepping too close to something they were never taught how to hold. So when emotional closeness deepens, even if everything seems fine on the surface, something inside them starts to panic. And that panic doesn't look loud, it looks like withdrawal, silence, sudden coldness, emotional distance. Avoidants often fear being engulfed in relationships, not because they don't care, but because they associate closeness with losing their independence or getting emotionally overwhelmed. Vulnerability for them is linked to danger, not connection. So when you start opening up more, or when the relationship becomes more emotionally demanding, like during a conflict or after a vulnerable moment, they don't lean in, they pull away. This isn't them being cruel, it's their system trying to protect them from what feels like emotional flooding. They also tend to intellectualize their feelings, which is just a fancy way of saying they detach from their emotions by overthinking them. So rather than saying, "That conversation made me feel exposed," they might think, "This relationship is moving too fast," or "Maybe I'm just not ready." It becomes easier to rationalize the distance than sit with the discomfort of emotional closeness. That's why they often say things like, "I need space," or "I'm confused." They're not lying, they're trying to regulate something inside that feels out of control. A woman I worked with, Jasmine, experienced this exact pattern. She had a few deep, meaningful weeks with her partner, talking about their futures, sharing vulnerable stories, and then, out of nowhere, he went quiet. No big fight, no warning, just emotional shutdown. Later, he admitted he felt too exposed, like things got too serious too fast. And what he needed wasn't her comfort, it was space. His nervous system needed to retreat to feel safe again, but to Jasmine, it felt like rejection. And this is the emotional disconnect. What feels like abandonment to you may feel like safety to them. But that doesn't make it okay. Understanding why they leave can help you stop blaming yourself, but it also reminds you that you deserve someone who stays when things get real. Now, let's talk about why avoidants come back, and why it can feel so confusing when they do. It often catches you off guard, right? Just when you've stopped checking your phone every 5 minutes, just when you've finally made peace with the silence, there they are. A message. A story reaction, a vague, "Hey, how've you been?" You might feel a rush of hope, or maybe a mix of anger and confusion. But here's what you need to know. They're not coming back because they suddenly realized your worth in a flash of romantic clarity. In most cases, it's about what's happening inside them, not about some grand epiphany. First, avoidants tend to come back after time and space have allowed their nervous system to calm down. Remember, they didn't leave because they stopped caring. They left because closeness felt overwhelming. Their instinct wasn't to punish you, it was to protect themselves. But once they've had distance from that emotional intensity, the fear begins to subside. They feel safer, less triggered, and only then does the idea of reconnecting start to feel comfortable again. Next, they begin to experience something called selective memory, or what I like to call emotional highlight reels. They don't remember the difficult conversations or how overwhelmed they felt. They remember the good parts, the safety, the warmth, the way you made them feel accepted. Their brain filters out the discomfort that made them pull away and starts focusing on the comfort they once had with you. This isn't intentional, it's just how their mind processes emotion. And it makes them believe, maybe I could reach out, maybe it wouldn't be so bad. But here's where things get even more complex. The realization that you're emotionally moving on can trigger their return. When an avoidant senses that you've truly detached, when you're no longer holding space, waiting, or sending energy their way, it can activate a deep fear of losing access. It's not necessarily about losing you, but losing the emotional safety you once gave them. Suddenly, the silence they once craved feels too quiet. They may not be consciously thinking they're slipping away, but they feel the absence, and that discomfort can drive them to reconnect. I worked with a client named Brian who had been in a relationship with an avoidant woman. After she broke things off, citing a need for space, he went through weeks of silence. No contact, no explanation. He finally accepted it, stopped checking her socials, and started dating again. Almost to the day he began moving forward, she reached out. She missed him. She said she'd been thinking about the good time, but when Brian gently brought up the old issues, her fear of closeness, her pattern of withdrawing, she got defensive. That was the moment he realized her return wasn't about resolution, it was about relief. She was reaching for the comfort of his emotional presence, not because she was ready for change. And this is so important to remember. Avoidants miss the emotional safety you provided, but they often only feel safe enough to return when you stop pressuring, chasing, or holding space. In your calm detachment, they sense freedom. That's when they feel safe enough to test the waters, but it's not always a signal of real emotional growth. So when they come back, ask yourself, are they returning with accountability or just looking for reassurance? Are they able to sit in emotional discomfort now, or are they still avoiding it? These are the questions that help you protect your peace. Because while their return might feel flattering, it's not a guarantee of change, and you deserve more than just someone who misses you. You deserve someone who's ready for you. Here's where you need to be really honest with yourself, because just because they come back doesn't mean they've changed. That moment when an avoidant reaches out can feel validating, even hopeful, but it's easy to mistake their return for readiness when really it may just be a temporary comfort grab. They're not necessarily returning to rebuild trust or do the deeper emotional work. More often, they're just trying to relieve their own discomfort. What you'll notice in these cases is that they often want connection on their terms. Limited vulnerability, low emotional accountability, and just enough closeness to feel soothed without being overwhelmed. They may say they miss you, and they probably do. But missing you and being emotionally available to grow with you are two very different things. If they haven't taken the time to reflect, to build emotional tools, to understand their part in the disconnect, then you're likely walking right back into the same cycle. That's the hard truth. The avoidant loop repeats unless something fundamentally changes. Closeness triggers fear. Fear leads to withdrawal. Distance brings longing. Longing sparks a return, and then it starts all over again. Unless the avoidant has developed enough self-awareness to recognize their patterns and actually do the work, their reappearance isn't a turning point, it's just a reset. I've seen this happen so many times with clients who thought this time will be different, only to find themselves right back in the same emotional maze. So when they return, don't just listen to their words, watch their actions. Are they showing up differently, or just showing up again? Because the goal isn't just to reconnect, it's to build a relationship where connection doesn't cost you your peace. And that takes more than missing someone. It takes growth. Let's bring this home with the truth you deserve to stand in. You don't need to chase love, wait in limbo, or decode mixed signals just to feel wanted. Avoidance may come back, yes, but not always for the reasons you hope. That's why it's so important to understand the root of their return without romanticizing it as transformation. Often, they're not returning because they've grown. They're returning because the distance helped them feel safe again. In this video, we unpacked what's really behind an avoidance reappearance. We explored how time and space calm their nervous system, how selective memory paints a filtered version of the past, and how your emotional detachment can spark their desire to reconnect. But most importantly, we highlighted this: coming back doesn't mean they're ready to stay. Without self-awareness, without emotional growth, without actual effort to show up differently, the cycle just repeats. And you deserve so much more than a recycled connection that runs on nostalgia and unspoken fear. So here's your empowering reminder. You don't need to wait around, hope harder, or keep the door half open just in case. If they return, meet them with calm clarity. Ask yourself, are they consistent? Are they accountable? Do their actions match their words? If the answer is no, then your peace matters more than their presence, because true emotional safety isn't something you wait for. It's something you create by honoring your needs, respecting your boundaries, and staying rooted in your own self-worth. That's how you break the cycle. That's how you invite real, healthy love in. Love that doesn't run from closeness, but meets you in it. Thank you so much for watching. If this video gave you clarity or comfort, I'd love to hear your story. Drop a comment below, share your experience, or ask your questions. I'm here to support you. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and stick around. Every week, we're breaking patterns and building peace, one healthy insight at a time. You're not too much, you're just no longer willing to settle for too little.